turn things over to Juanita.
Thanks, Jim, and welcome everybody to this last program of 2022. I've got a lot to talk about. As usual, I probably made too many slides, so I better get started immediately. And I think the first thing I'm going to tell you is how I got to be a wildlife transporter. Oh, but before I do that, I do want to have a shout out to my husband, Blaine, who is often my co-pilot on some of these adventures. And it's really good to have someone who's in charge of the car while you're hanging out the window looking for an access point in a section of woods or trying to find a particular waterway. So he's been very helpful. And I also want to say thank you to Nicole Golden from the Mercer County Wildlife Center, who spent a couple of hours talking to me about what she does there and what everybody does for turtles, and also sent some of the great pictures that you'll be seeing in a few minutes. So I got into the wildlife transport business when I, as a result of being a Wildlife Conservation Corps volunteer, which is a branch, volunteer branch of the DEP, got a notification that there's a big rehabber conference happening in Princeton, and there was a wildlife capture and transport certification course being given by Peggy Sue Hintz, founder of the Red Creek Wildlife Center. And she is an absolutely fantastic wildlife rehabber and a great speaker, very entertaining. If you ever get a chance to see a program that she's done, you should take a look at that. And one of the takeaways I got from her was that sometimes the animal you're picking up from a non-wildlife savvy person may not be what you were told it was, based on her experience, where she was told that somebody had a baby bear in their barn. And she went there with a collie to capture the baby bear and found out that it was actually a fisher, which they were able to capture with some difficulty. Fishers really don't like hanging out with people. They're quite aggressive animals. And on the way back to the wildlife center, it managed to chew its way out of the animal carrier and get loose in the back of the car. And so they made an executive decision that if that animal was healthy enough to get itself, chew its way out of a cage, it was probably healthy enough to be released. And they just pulled over to the side of the road and let it out. Fortunately, I've never had that kind of an experience. She also had another case where somebody said they had baby eagles. They had found some baby eagles, and eagles are federally protected, and the paperwork associated with them is horrendous. When they got there, they found out it was actually a much smaller bird. They were baby kestrels. So sometimes you don't know what you're getting yourself into, which is all part of the adventure. After I got my certificate, I got a call from Mercer County Wildlife Center, and they told me they had need for someone to bring turtles to specialist rehabber because they didn't have enough room in their reptile room to keep turtles that needed long-term care. It was about the size of a broom closet, and they could handle infections and maybe an eye infection or cut on a leg or something, but they could not do the kind of shell repairs that turtles sometimes need. And so that's how I met Harriet Forster of New Jersey Turtle Rescue, who is an amazing rehabber who's invented several novel methods of shell repair that people are still using today. I learned a lot about turtles from her. And a couple of takeaways there were, she told me that you shouldn't be too quick to assume that a turtle is dead, even though it appears to be not moving and non-responsive. Turtles are very resilient. They might actually still be alive. And basically, as what would happen to a person who was in a traumatic car crash or something, may simply have lost consciousness. They go into kind of a dormant state. And the other thing is that even if a female turtle is in fact dead or too badly injured to be saved, her eggs may still be viable. You may be able to keep the turtles line going by harvesting and hatching the eggs. Then Harriet retired, and Mercer County again had this dilemma of having turtles coming in from all over the state that needed long-term care, but still couldn't be accommodated in this broom closet size reptile room. but they rose to the occasion magnificently. Cooperative efforts from the Mercer County Park Commission, which oversees the Wildlife Rehab Center and the buildings and everything, plus some donations from private donors through the Wildlife Friends, which is a nonprofit that accepts donations to the Wildlife Center to be used for making things better for the animals. Now, thanks to these people, the turtles now have a nice little hospital of their own, and there's even a nursery, and we'll be seeing more about that in a few minutes. Shout out to Nicole Golden. She's the rehab manager at Mercer County Wildlife Center, and she first tried hatching a batch of eggs from a doomed female turtle on an experimental basis. It's a sad fact that the majority of the turtles that are killed on roadways are gravid females looking for a suitable place to lay their eggs. And of course, they are carrying the future generations of turtles. So that is a real tragedy. And this is what inspired her to try hatching eggs. This is an X-ray of a female turtle that was either actually dead or on death's doorstep. I don't know the situation of this particular one, but she was looking at, if you look carefully, you'll see all these little oval shapes. They're outlined in little white lines here. All of those shapes are eggs ready to be laid inside the body of this turtle. And she thought that was a terrible waste. So she was going to try just on her own to harvest the eggs and see if, and bury them in probably some sand. That's what they usually use to see what would happen. Give them a little bit of heat and wait. And a few weeks later, she discovered the experiment was wildly successful, and she had a whole lot of baby turtles on her hands. And this program continued. There are now, and because of that, there are a lot more turtles that need to go home, because returning the hatchlings to their mother's home territory, to the place where the mother was found, not only helps keep the line going, but it's also more likely to lead to the turtles being able to survive. Let's have a look at inside of a turtle here to find out why they have special needs when it comes to rehabilitation. A turtle's shell is not merely a protection from the outside world. It's actually bone. It's actually part of the turtle's skeleton. It's an exoskeleton. So the vertebrae and the ribs are all fused together along with the pelvic girdle and the shoulder girdle. And this is solid bone. Bone forms inside the ribs and the vertebrae and all. You'll see that in a second what that looks like from the inside. And the plastron is also made from bony plates, which come from a different embryonic source. But because this is bone, if a turtle suffers a shell fracture, that's like you or I breaking an arm or a leg or our back. This is solid bone, it's living bone, it will bleed. It will be very painful for the turtle because turtles do feel pain. And it's highly likely to get infected with either bacteria or fungus, or if it is not healed up before the animal is returned to the wild. If this happens to an animal in the wild and it's a severe break, that animal will die a very slow and painful death. But just like our broken bones, it takes a long time for these breaks to heal. And the turtle has to be looked after, sometimes for months, before everything is healed enough to allow it to return to the wild. This is the inside of this little structure of a snapping turtle, and you can see there's the vertebrae. The ribs are along the inside. I hope you can see my cursor. I was giving a program one time and I realized I could see my cursor, but nobody else could. This is the snapping turtle. So just look at, this is the plastron of a snapping turtle. Just keep that in mind when we're looking at some individual slides of snapping turtles, because they're constructed a little bit differently, but they still have the same problems with shell injuries being potentially disastrous. They seem to get run over by cars a lot. There are 18 species of turtle that can be found in the wild in New Jersey. 5 of these are sea turtles that don't nest any farther north in the Carolinas. Although they do visit New Jersey coastal waters at certain times of the year, they are all endangered. All species of sea turtles are endangered, and some are on the verge of extinction. Though they're special because they are marine creatures, and they have a special rehabilitation needs quite apart from the regular ones of other types of turtles. So today we're going to look at the 13 species of turtles, a closer look at those, the ones that live out their entire life cycles in New Jersey. Now, I apologize for this slide. This is the first time I've done this program, and I'm going to get a better version of this, but there are a few points that I can make from this slide. First of all, these top 2 turtles, the red-eared slider, which many of us had as pets back in the days when keeping pet turtles was allowed. In some places it's not anymore. And the eastern spiny softshell turtle. So these 2 are introduced species. We'll see more about them later. They don't belong here. And if they come into wildlife centers, if they have a serious injury, they may be treated, but they are not released into the wild again because they don't belong there. They sometimes end up in classrooms or maybe nature centers. Somebody can adopt them, but they don't go back into the wild. Of the 11 species of turtle we have that do belong in New Jersey, 6 of them are actually under some degree of a threat to their existence. I put the IUCN codes in here just to give you an idea of how endangered some of them are. CR stands for critically endangered, endangered, vulnerable, near threatened. LC means least concern. It's important to note that even the species of least concern are showing serious population declines in the state of New Jersey. So pretty soon they may be entering into the territory of being near threatened or vulnerable. I've put something into the into my last slide, a resource if you want to know more about what the IUCN codes mean. But I put them all in red, and you'll see these red things appearing on slides later on, indicating turtles that are at increased risk of either becoming extirpated from the state or, in worst case situation, extinct altogether. Another thing you can glean from this slide is that turtles have quite a range in size. The smallest turtle is the bog turtle, which doesn't get much bigger than 4 inches long. That's measuring the carapace. And the snapping turtle is interesting. Most turtles stop growing after a period of time. But snapping turtles apparently keep on growing for their entire lives, although it does slow down a bit as they get older. And that's why you can have some monstrously big snapping turtles out there in nature, a couple of which I've met personally. Many species of turtle, the female is considerably bigger than the male. That's the case of the eastern painted turtle, whereas the female tops out at about 10 inches, but the males only get to be about 6 inches. And the opposite is true for snapping turtles. So typically the males are bigger than the females. What else can I tell you here? Oh, turtles are very long-lived. They are so long-lived that they actually often outlive people who are studying them. So it can take 2 or 3 generations to actually figure out how, and document how old these turtles get. So we've got some pretty good documentation for a couple of species, but other species we're guessing. And the interesting thing about turtles is that they are likely to live longer in the wild once they reach adulthood than in captivity. So we really don't know how long some of these species could live. There's pretty good evidence that there are some snapping turtles that have exceeded the century mark. Okay. Major hazards facing turtles in the modern world. Number one is habitat loss and habitat fragmentation. This is particularly the case with box turtles, who are primarily terrestrial, and in many cases they're getting squeezed out by things like, could be a warehouse development, which takes over most of the habitat, and they're squeezed into a very small area, and that's what gets them into trouble. I actually saw a case like that where I brought a box turtle back to the shore. There was a gigantic warehouse development there, and only a small bit of habitat left for this turtle to go to. There's a particular problem with box turtles, and the fact that they seem to have little GPSs in their brains that become sort of fixated on their own little territory as they're growing up in it, and you cannot move them. So you can't put that turtle someplace else. The outcome will not be good. I think there are a lot of turtles living among us, and we're completely unaware of it, and completely unaware that we are making it impossible for them to continue existing. Motor vehicles are most often a cause of death or serious injury, getting run over by something. A majority of these turtles that get run over are females of the various species going to lay eggs. Even water turtles do not lay their eggs in water. They often seek high, warm ground, and sometimes being long-lived, they may have been laying their eggs in the same place for many, many years. And then all of a sudden, one spring, they get out of the water, and and this is another situation that I saw, a brand new parking lot with a brand new strip mall and a brand new housing development. And this very old female painted turtle had been run over in the parking lot. She was able to be fixed up, but I could just see her, having laid her eggs in the same place, same general area for many, many years, coming out one spring and discovering that it was paved over. And then she had to go and try and find someplace else to lay her eggs. And that's where she got into trouble. Lawnmowers, whoops, sorry about that. Lawnmowers are a big problem for box turtles in particular, also snapping turtles. My very first turtle transport up to Harriet was a very large snapping turtle that had encountered a lawnmower. It had a whole series of slices off the top of its shell where the lawnmower blade had gone over it. Otherwise, it wasn't doing too badly, but those had to be repaired so that the shell would not become infected. It was a very large snapping turtle. It was in a very large bin at the wildlife center, and that would not fit in my car, so it had to go into only a slightly smaller large bin. We put that, and we looked at it and said, no, I can't climb out of there, no way. So I started off for Harriet's place, and the turtle was scratching around quite a bit. It wasn't happy to be in the bin. After a while, I heard a thunk, and then a minute later, I looked in my rear view mirror, and there was the turtle looking out the back window of my car. And so I noticed that it had turned around and it was trying to climb up out of the cargo compartment into the back seat of the car. So something had to be done. So I pulled into a shopping mall that was nearby, got out, and managed to convince the turtle to come down off the back seat. And I just plopped the whole bin down over it and took it on up to Harriet. That way, she's very experienced handling turtles, and we were able to carefully get that huge snapping turtle out of the car safely with no humans being hurt in the process. Dogs are another thing. They, especially if the dog gets trapped, if the turtle gets trapped in somebody's yard with a dog, they can sometimes survive it, but sometimes they do suffer shell damage, and the types of turtles that can't close up into their shells have a particularly tough time. And that's just something that happens. Again, we've got more humans and more human pets coming in contact with more turtles. Adverse human possession. I love that term because it really describes, this is somebody who's decided that they're going to get their pet out of the wild and they bring a turtle home. Maybe they see it crossing the road. I once stopped a man from bringing a painted turtle that was going to lay eggs, bringing it home to his kids. By first of all guarding it until it was too far gone to be found again by him, just in case he changed his mind and came back and tried to get it again. But also, I hope I convinced him that that he shouldn't do that. That he should let turtles live out their lives and go where they wanted to go. And poachers, some species of turtle are very popular with poachers. And then there's all these miscellaneous things that happen. Construction, I once went to pick up a turtle that had been dug up in the middle of winter by some people who were digging a hole to put in a swimming pool. And you can't, if you dig an animal up out of its brumation place, box turtles can sleep as, they will dig themselves as deep as 3 feet underground, trying to stay below the frost line. And they will sometimes come up a little bit if it's warmer. They won't go back to sleep again. You can't just cover them up after they've been dug up and put them back again. So they have to go to a rehabber to be overwintered, and then they can go back into their habitats again in the springtime. Mountain bikes. I once transported a turtle that had this strange, very thin shell crush injury on the top of the shell. Didn't look like a car tire, but something looked like it'd been run over by something. So I took it back to the parking lot of the, I think with the county park, where it had been found. And there, right near the edge of the parking lot, was a sign advertising the trailhead for a mountain biking trail, which that's probably what happened. They often like to stop in the middle of trails and just bask there for a while. Maybe there's a bit of sun or a little clearing, it's a little warmer, and they can get run over by bikes too. The golf club is not like the club where you go to play golf. It's the golf, the instrument that you use to play golf. And I had one turtle that was saved by a good Samaritan at the Cream Ridge Golf Club. Somebody was attempting to kill it with a golf club by hitting it repeatedly in the head area. And it had a big concave dent in the top of its shell near where its head was trying to pull its head in, of course. I think it might have had a head injury too. So that one had to go for some long-term rehabilitation. And a swimming pool. And so there are people who, you know, the bad guys who want to kill turtles, particularly snapping turtles. A lot of people really don't like snapping turtles. I think they don't understand them. But there are people who try to do the right thing. And that was the case with a tiny, maybe a year old at most, box turtle, which someone had fished out of their swimming pool. They were getting it ready for springtime. I think they'd done something called shocking, which putting a lot of chlorine into it to, kill off bacteria quickly and getting it ready for spring. And unfortunately, a hatchling box turtle had found its way into the pool. And I didn't know this until I brought the turtle back to the place where it was supposed to go and ran into the owner. And he was absolutely mortified that this had happened. The turtle looked a little weird. Its shell, honestly, still looked rather bleached. But he knew he had box turtles on his property, and he was absolutely horrified that this poor thing had fallen into the pool. He was really delighted to have it back again. And in order to prevent that ever happening again, he had constructed this big privacy fence, which went all the way down to the ground so that no turtle would ever fall into his swimming pool again. So some people really want to do the right thing. So back to Mercer County Wildlife Center and the Turtle Hospital. This has been nicknamed the Shell Shack. It is a very nicely appointed turtle hospital. You can see that each turtle, it has its own private cubicle with privacy curtain and everything that they need. And if You just zoom in a little bit here. You see that each one has its identifying name and what it is and what's wrong with it. So this one is in for, has a tumor on its left foot. And this one has carapace damage. They deal with a lot of different things, and they can deal with a lot of different things now that they have the room and the space. And since they're now having such luck hatching out baby turtles, there's a baby turtle nursery. So this one has, I think, the snapping turtle, painted turtle, and some map turtles. Baby turtles are kept there until their yolk sacs. They have yolk sacs just like baby birds do, and they're absorbed until they're absorbed, and then they're ready to be released. But during that period of time, they're kept a little bit warmer than other turtles. But they have everything they need. Here's some baby map turtles in here, and they've got a place to hide and places to get out and bask. They've also got some floating vegetation. Map turtles, particularly juveniles, like to eat. They eat a lot more vegetable material than the juveniles of other species of turtle, and they will eat floating vegetation. And so you can't really see it in this slide, but there's this sign down here that says no plastic plants, because map turtles have quite strong jaws, and they might actually try and eat, maybe unfortunately succeed in ingesting some plastic. Just another point that plastic in our waterways, the kind of damage that it can do, we should try and do more, I think, to keep plastic out of our waterways. Or you're going to hurt some little guys like this. So here's a picture of Nicole. She doesn't like to have her picture taken. I understand, because I don't either. So I thought I'd just sneak in a little sideways view here. But this is the turtle hatching facility that they have at Mercer County Wildlife. And she's opening the top here. There are 2 boxes of sand. A lot of turtles seem to do quite well. Turtle eggs do quite well in sand. And there's one that has wood chips and that type of stuff in it, which box turtles seem to prefer. And here's one of the staffers putting in some map turtle eggs into this hole. The eggs are put into the hole that harvested from the females and buried, and they put a little cage around it each. So there's like either three different types of three batches of eggs anyway, being here. And then when the babies hatch, they don't get all mixed up with each other, I guess, if they're in these little enclosures. Okay, let's have a look at some of the individual turtles. We'll get rid of these 2 invasive types first, but I just want to show you how much the red-eared slider, strictly because of the pet trade, has extended around the United States. So this is its historical range, this tan-colored area here, and it's now all over the place, all through New Jersey, where it's causing problems in some of our smaller waterways for painted turtles, or native painted turtles. But it's everywhere. It's gotten into watersheds all over the place, even in Alaska, in Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and Guam, and other countries as well. So if you do ever have a red-eared slider as a pet, don't ever release it or any other species into the wild, really. It's not any other invasive species or non-native species. It can have drastic effects. And this creature here, which looks very, in some ways, it looks like I have actually seen these in the wild. They're native to Southern Ontario. I've seen them in Southern Ontario. They look like big pancakes floating in the water. They don't have a hard, bony carapace. They have a sort of a thick leather skin that covers their, that serves as a carapace, I guess you would say. They're native. They have a pretty extensive range in the central part of the country, and there are some other subspecies that make up the rest, but they are not native to our area. There should be like 0 soft-shell turtles in New Jersey, and right now they have established quite substantial populations, from what I understand, in the Raritan River watershed as well as the Maurice River watershed. I have not heard any problems with them interfering with other species, but I couldn't swear to that. Or that may happen in the future when they become even more numerous because they're doing very well. By the way, if you ever come across one of these, you should avoid picking it up. They have a vicious bite, and they will bite, and they will also claw you with their very strong claws. Not a turtle to mess with, and they're also quite large. Another large turtle is the snapping turtle. This blue color on the snapping turtle here is a little bit of an artifact. It actually was more of a gray color, but this turtle was big and heavy and very old. It looked every bit 100 years old, and it was very grumpy. So snapping turtles are widely spread throughout the country. One of the reasons for them being least concern is because they are so numerous, and they can live in many, many different waterways, both freshwater and brackish. They're omnivorous, and depending on the size, they will eat aquatic vegetation, but some of them are big enough to eat small mammals and birds. People have sometimes seen them, little ducklings disappearing from the water on ponds because they disappear under the water and are never seen again. And that's because of one of these guys. They're actually, I've actually kind of gotten to like snapping turtles. There's something so prehistoric, stolid, and ancient about them. And as long as you respect them, you should not have a problem with them. Just a quick look at the anatomy of a snapping turtle, which is a little bit different. They remind me of children's Halloween costumes, which you put on. So this is the carapace, and then there's this thin, very thin plastron, small plastron that I showed you in the skeleton of the snapping turtle. They have very long necks that allow them to actually go all the way up and breathe air at the top of the water without ever coming up. This makes them very good skulkers. They do often hunt for things like mammals and birds from underneath the water. They just kind of sneak up on them. And the fact that they don't have very much confining bony shell in this area here is what makes them be such good climbers. In fact, they've been there are videos of them climbing chain link fences and things like that. Pretty impressive animals. This is a little video of a female snapping turtle. She wasn't very big. I'd say she was maybe 8 inches long, I think it would be a good estimate. And she came and decided that one of our garden beds was a perfect place to lay her eggs. And so I was able to get a video of her doing exactly that. Okay, she is going to lay 3 eggs. And in the interest of time, I will just fast forward this a little bit here. Okay. There's egg number 1, and you can see she covers it up with a little bit of soil. And pretty soon we'll have egg number 2. She laid about, I'd say about a dozen eggs during the period of time that she was there. And then she just very slowly lumbered off back into the woods. And I did protect the nest. I covered it up with screens, and so that raccoons, in particular in our yard, raccoons love to muck around in disturbed dirt. They're looking for exactly things like that, turtle eggs. But unfortunately, the eggs never hatched. So I'm not sure exactly what happened. Perhaps they hadn't been fertilized. That happens sometimes. This would look like quite a young female, actually. It takes turtles a long time to mature, also 5 to 15 years before they are capable. So maybe this turtle's been around the bend. There's egg number 3. And there we go. Okay, put that back in our, oops, wrong direction here. Yeah, here we go. And here's another video. This is a very young snapping turtle. This one was taken from an area, whether the Passaic River or something leading into the Passaic River up that way anyway, near the Garrett Mountain area. Birders are familiar with that area. And somebody had picked this one up when it was a hatchling and apparently brought it home. And then I guess decided that they didn't really want to keep the snapping turtle anymore. But they did the right thing. They surrendered it to the Wildlife Center. And since it was still young and had been found in this area, it was and healthy, it was releasable back into this area where it had come from. And so I just took a video of this hatchling going out into the wild for the first times. And this will also illustrate just how long the neck of a snapping turtle is when you, towards the end of the video. So there it goes into the water. Not too sure about this, but besides, it's not so bad after all. Okay, so first it thinks maybe it'll go to the right. And then it changes its mind. It's going to turn around and go the other way. And just look at the neck here. It stretches it way out, way out. And you can see why. If you want to pick up a snapping turtle, you need to pick it up down here and nowhere in the middle, because it really can reach around and get you. So let's move on to box turtles. These are I have transported more box turtles than any other species, I think. They are, and it's not because there are a whole lot of them anymore. It's because a whole lot of them are getting into trouble because they're terrestrial. They do like to live in forests, but they need an open area like a meadow, grassy area, something where there's more sun so that the place where they lay their eggs will be warmer to hatch the eggs. And that's, again, when a lot of them get into trouble. They also will walk around quite a bit to looking for mates at that particular time of year. And that's another time when they get into trouble. And given that their habitat, even though they're all over the eastern part of the US and up into Canada as well, even though they've got a fairly large amount of territory, their individual territories are very small, and their habitat, as I mentioned earlier, is getting increasingly fragmented. So these are trouble. These are species that are in trouble. They're species of special concern in New Jersey. Just a point here that this is a male, not because it has red eyes, but males typically do have red eyes, and they also have a concavity in their shells that aids them in mounting the female during mating. And females do not have that concavity on their plastron, and they often have brown eyes, but not all the time. Sometimes they're yellowish and sometimes they're a bit orangish. But if you have brown eyes and a relatively flat plastron, you can be pretty sure that's a female, and red eyes and a concave plastron, that's a male. Box turtles have that internal GPS. Their home territories are small. They can be as small as half an acre or up to about 10 acres. However, some of them, especially in fragmented habitat, have been documented as walking almost a mile before they found a place where they could lay their eggs. When they have to move those kinds of distances, that's when they get into trouble. And also, if someone picks them up and moves them from their home territory, decides that they're going to be better off living in their own backyard than in and where they grow up, they will often die in the process of trying to find their way back home. Uh, Box turtles are omnivorous, so the young ones are mostly carnivorous, and you will sometimes find them hunting in like shallow water for things to eat. But the adults eat much more plant material, and in fact have very little need for water at all, since they got a lot of water they need from the vegetation that they eat. They will sometimes be found basking on very hot days in a shallow bit of water to stay cool, but most of the time they're on land. Baby box turtles don't have the high dome shell of their parents, and it takes 4 to 5 years for them to develop the hinges on the plastron that allow them to close up. So during that period of time, they're very vulnerable to natural predators. And here comes my first dose of cuteness. This is a newly hatched baby box turtle. That one was hatched at Mercer County. It still has its little egg tooth that it pips the eggshell with. And this is another box turtle. That's the resident Mercer County Wildlife Center. It's an education animal. Education animals are animals that can't be released into the wild because they have some sort of an injury. Maybe they're blind in one eye, or maybe it's a bird with broken wings, something like that, an animal that would not have much chance of survival if released. However, they can be used to teach people, particularly school children, about nature. And so they can still serve a purpose. In the case of a box turtle, I'm not sure if this is the one, but Nicole told me a story about one that was found by a man at a rest stop somewhere along a highway somewhere. And he brought it back he brought it back with him looking for a place where it could get some help because it was clearly injured. So his daughter found Mercer County Wildlife and arranged to bring the box turtle there. And of course, they asked her where it had been found so that they could have someone return it to the place. And so she didn't know. So when she went to ask her father had died. So they never did find out where the box turtle came from, and therefore that particular box turtle could not be released. Now, again, I'm not saying if that this is this one, but that can happen. And this is one beautiful box turtle. Look at the pattern on this shell. One of the things I've been doing, I've got scores and scores and scores of box turtles now. Someday when I retire from being a wildlife transporter and all the other things I do, I'm going to work on a project to put them all together and put them all on a map and see if there are any other patterns. But look at the difference in patterns. This particular one came from the Galloway area. That's down where the Forsyth NWR is. And many of the turtles that come from that area they've got deep, dark shells and a lot of orange on their bodies and on their carapaces. And this one is from the Hopewell area. And I've noticed a lot of the turtles in this area have lighter shells and tend more towards a yellowish pattern. But you can see the variety, different patterns. Some of them are madly symmetrical like this turtle, whereas others are kind of have their spots scattered all over the place. So you can actually, so far, I think box turtles are kind of like snowflakes, no two are exactly the same. You can probably tell. And hopefully I'll be able to make this into a bit bigger kind of a collage with box turtle patterns, because I think it's kind of fascinating, actually. Here's another vulnerable animal, diamondback terrapins, and this is a species that had good luck hatching at Mercer County. This is a beautiful female box turtle. I love the patterns. They look very reptilian, their heads and the feet and everything, but they're just absolutely beautiful. They're located, there's northern and southern subspecies. The northern ones are what we have, and they are located all along the coastal area in the coastal marshes down the eastern seaboard. An interesting thing I've noticed is that so often I have quite a few turtles going to quite a few different places at the same time, and quite often, and so they're usually pretty quiet. They usually don't get too upset after about 15 minutes. They settle down in the car. But quite often I will go when some turtles turn to get out and find that the turtle is up and ready to leave the box. I think not only box turtles have an internal homing system, I think some other turtles do too. And this terrapin was certainly like that. She was ready to get out of the box when I took her out. And here she is released into the marsh. You can see how much webbing they have, this particular species has in between their toes there and their feet. Good for swimming in the deeper waters of the bay. And here are some diamondback terrapins hatching out at Mercer County. This is very natural for terrapins. Terrapins live in water, but again, they need a warm, dry place to lay their eggs, and that place is usually sand dunes by the shore. And here is what these little guys look like after they've had their first bath. They have all the sand cleaned off. They are just the most darling things you can imagine, so full of life and so fresh looking. I just love them. How big are they when they're ready to be released into the wild? Not much bigger than a quarter. That's pretty tiny to be taking on the big world. Whenever I get a box of these little guys from Mercer County, it's like getting a box of hope. They're hope for the future, especially knowing what happened to their mother. And these ones, I think this batch went back to Barnegat Bay. And I was looking for a good place to put them in. The babies have to go into an area where they can seek shelter. That's their first impulse. And they are prone to being eaten by seagulls when they're this small. A lot of them get snapped up by gulls or other shorebirds, because they really are pretty tiny. And so I found a very nice marsh with enough vegetation. And it looked like one of the things you have to do if you're transporting turtles, think like the turtle when you're looking for exactly the right place to put it back. And this marsh looked perfect to me when I put on my terrapin hat or mindset. And as I was walking to the marsh, I noticed some little flipper marks in the sand. At that time, they were definitely baby turtle feet. And the only baby turtles you would find in that place at that time of year would have been diamondback terrapin babies. And they were heading the same direction that I was heading with these babies. So that made me feel good that I was probably putting them into the right place. This is Stone Harbor Boulevard, a place that I've been down a few times. And in this case, I was returning these. I think there are 2 or 3 of them there. And they were going into this bay area. As you can see, people there are very much aware that they have turtle crossings there. And this is the area where the mother was found. So I don't think the turtle crossing sign helped very much. So this is Stone Harbor Boulevard. This is Avalon Boulevard over here. This area in here is absolutely heaven for diamondback terrapins, and the roads are absolute hell that go through them, as is this barrier beach, which at one time in the distant past was sandbar only and now is heavily developed. And if you look at animals that are coming out of this Cape May Wetlands Wildlife Management Area, will be heading for dunes to lay their eggs. And this is where the dunes are. Let's just have a look at what this looks like. Satellite view, you can see a turtle. Now this, I believe is the Avalon Bay Park Marina, where this animal the mother had been found dead, and they were able to harvest the eggs from that mother and hatch them. And so the mother came out somewhere around here, but look what she would have had to go through to get to the dunes where the dunes are to lay her eggs. streets, cars, boats in the marina. Things are very different, very difficult, I should say, and very different from the past for these animals when they're trying to just follow their biological imperatives. But some people are doing things about it. This is Margate Boulevard. It's up to south of Atlantic City. This is another place where they have a lot of turtle mortality. So 7 years ago, they formed the Margate Terrapin Rescue Project, and volunteers go out now and they're putting in barriers along the side of the road to keep the terrapins from the crossing the road and getting onto the road and getting into trouble. And as you can see, this works quite well. The terrapins cannot climb over those barriers. The Wetlands Institute, which is located in near Stone Harbor, has documented 10,000 terrapin deaths in their area between 1989 and 2011, and most of them were females. And now they're finding between 400, 600 dead adult female terrapins every year. So I put some information in the last slide about this Margate Terrapin Rescue Project, particularly the type of barriers and wildlife crossings that they're using, because in this area we are trying to work on making some wildlife crossings for different types of reptiles and amphibians that need help and that are getting killed on our roads as well. So people who are interested in that might find some interesting information there. Or if you have a house at the shore, you might be interested in helping with this kind of a project, because terrapins are under a lot of pressure. Okay, quickly, it's getting a bit late. Some more turtles. Probably this is the next most after box turtles and snapping turtles. Painted turtles are one that seem to get into trouble. There are actually a few species, subspecies of terrapins. We have the eastern painted turtle here. There's some intergrade zones here, the Midlands and the western painted turtles. And also some in the south. For this species, there are a lot. These are all the same species, just different adaptations to different environmental conditions. If they live long enough as a species or go far enough into the future, there might be some more speciation there, but right now they're all considered to be the same species. They're very pretty. This is a young one with nice red marks and yellow spots on its head. If you turn it upside down, it looks pretty underneath too, especially along the edges of the shell. And for the eastern painted turtle, the carapace has a lot of yellow with a little blotching like this. But the Midlands painted turtle, I just happen to have a photo of this one from southern Ontario, which is where this one is named. They are really colorful. They're absolutely gorgeous. Tend to have a lot of red in the plastron, more red on the body, and more red on the shell as well. So far, this turtle is okay, but numbers are dropping. Common map turtle, here's another adorable baby map turtle hatched at Mercer County Wildlife, which is contemplating its future. It has a very small range in New Jersey. It's up in the northern reaches of the Delaware River. They're usually found in the Delaware River. I think the mother of this one, I believe, was found on River Road, which is, only a canal's width away from the Delaware River. So maybe the mother turtle came out of the canal, but it came from someplace along there for sure. And it just occurs from the Delaware water gap south to about Trenton. So that's its range in New Jersey. We don't see these too often. I've only transported these. I didn't transport this one. I think, I didn't release this little baby, but I have transported map turtle to I think only a couple of times. It's not a turtle that gets into trouble too often, probably because it spends most of its time in the river. This is a northern red-bellied cooter, also known as a red belly, or sometimes just a red belly turtle. It's all the same species. The young ones are very colorful. They live in ponds and rivers, and they have actually a relatively small distribution, which may be why they are starting to be a species of concern. You will find them starting south of Trenton in New Jersey and down through the rest of the state. There's a small, what they call a vestigial population in Massachusetts. They figure that this species was much more widely distributed maybe before the ice age, the last ice age, and now it's just been, this area has been kind of cleared. And there's also a small vestigial population in West Virginia, but otherwise this is it. And this is just a side note, whoops, while I was researching these, that in 2019 and 20, some of these red bellies in Sussex and Cumberland counties were found to have these horrible looking lesions on their shells. And it's still not known what is causing them, but people who observe something like this, if they happen to find turtles with this problem, are asked to report any turtles, actually, not just the red bellies, although I think they've only been found, this has only been found in red bellies so far, to the DEP. And I have some information on how to do that in my final slide. I did contact the guy who was in charge of this project and to ask him whether there'd been any updates. And he said they still don't, they haven't drawn any conclusions as to what is causing it. They have a lot of samples that are currently being analyzed, and they hope to be able to have some conclusions about what the cause is by sometime next year. Right now, it's kind of frustrating. Those are horrible lesions. So here's a beautiful red belly, and this one has no lesions. This is one that I had an adventure with too. As I mentioned earlier, the turtles are usually pretty chill when you're transporting them, but this one would not settle down. It was scrabbling around and scratching and the whole time. Finally got it back to its river. It was one of the last turtles to get out, and that turtle I got to snap one picture after I released it, and it went racing back into the water. It swam away as fast as it could. And it just seemed a little bit odd to me, but so later on, we got home, my husband, and the next day we put all the bins in the garage. My husband was washing them out the next day before we were going to return them to the wildlife center, and I heard a shout, and what is this? And here's what we found. A stowaway rat snake had been hiding out underneath the towel in the base of the bucket that we transported this poor turtle in. And I guess it must have been aware of the snake, although we weren't. And that's what was causing it to be so distressed. Anyway, nothing happened. The snake, first I was puzzled as to where the snake came from, but so I called the wildlife center. I said, are you guys missing a rat snake? And they said, oh my gosh, torn the place apart looking for it. Apparently it had escaped from its aquarium, and apparently found, they just put out these bins for the turtles with nice warm towels from the dryer in them. And apparently the snake decided that that's where it was going to spend the rest of the day. So it took a trip to South Jersey, but I did take it immediately back to the wildlife center, so its escape plans were foiled. This is another endangered turtle, and we don't see that one very often here, the spotted turtle. I think Fairfax mentioned a while ago that she found one up on Baldpate Mountain. They usually like swampy, boggy fens, stuff like that to live in. They don't like deep water areas particularly, but it's only semi-aquatic, so they do spend a certain amount of time walking around on land. However, this guy distributed all down the East Coast here and around the Great Lakes, where the types of water conditions that it likes are found. But this one came from the middle of Trenton. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Mill Hill Park. That's where the Assunpink Creek runs through. And when you look at this on a map, it looks like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go there. I'm going to park, and I'm just going to go turtle back where it was found, like in the creek somewhere here. Well, it's not that easy to get down to that creek, Trenton. They clearly don't want people messing around in it. But I had to see what it looked like, and I certainly wasn't going to take the turtle and drop it off one of the bridges. That was not going to happen. So I had to go down into the creek to have a look, and I did find it was maybe under here or somewhere. I'm not sure, one of these things. There's a set of stairs, and then there was a hill going down, and there wasn't any fence there. So I managed to get down there, and the water was surprisingly clean. I was so delighted to see that. There were dry areas where the turtle could easily get out. The water was shallow. It looked like it was going to be quite happy there as long as it stayed down and didn't come up into the high traffic areas. Kind of hoping it would walk back upstream a little farther up the Assunpink. But when I got back up after climbing around down there, I discovered I had a small audience watching me. People who had gathered around wondering what this crazy old lady was doing down in the creek bed. So I sort of tried to explain myself, but I'm not sure they believed me. But that's okay. It was all for a good cause. This is an eastern mud turtle, and I think I've only ever had one of these, kind of surprisingly. I took this back to its home. It was well described by the lady who had found it. You'll notice here that the turtle brumates, which is kind of a lighter form of hibernation in burrows from September to May. So it spends a lot of time, longer than almost any other turtle, asleep. And we were in September. So this turtle had to get back to its home pretty quick so it could dig its burrow and settle down for the winter. And the area I found, which was clearly described by the person who found it, looked completely dry to me when I arrived. So I was a little bit worried. It was called a creek, but it looked like a ditch. I would have called it a ditch if I hadn't known that it maybe ran into another waterway and thus was a creek. And so I climbed down into it just to try and get a look under the road to see if and it was nice and mushy. I always wear boots when I do these things, by the way. So the banks were mushy, the bottom was mushy. It was a perfect place for this little mud turtle to go back to its home. This is not, I don't know, either I forgot to take a picture of it or I lost my photo in the vast mass of thousands of photographs that I have, but they're funny looking little things. They're quite tiny too. They're about 4.5 inches long at the most. And they seem to be all head. They're quite cute. Common musk turtle. This is a turtle that I don't think I've ever transported this one, although I have seen them in the wild. They spend most of their time quite close to their river or stream homes. And maybe they just don't get into trouble as often as other people. They're also probably not very popular with collectors because they do have glands on the skin under the edge of their shell that contribute to the name stink pot. They're pretty smelly. They sometimes end up grabbing bait on fishermen's hooks, so people find that they've got a turtle at the end of their fishing line. This is another endangered turtle, and this is one that I actually have in my yard list. This one has pretty limited range around the Great Lakes again, and in this section of the Northeast and a little bit up into Canada. The thing about wood turtles is that they become very, very attached to the streams that they were born in. And little colonies will form that will not move very far away from those streams. They like the kind of clean water that we have up here in the Sourlands. And so I know there are at least 2 streams in the Sourlands that have these turtles in them. Unfortunately, I couldn't find, I know I've taken a couple of, I haven't actually seen them in the yard for a few years, so I don't have a recent photo. So I'd have to dig really deep back into the archives to find the photos that I took of them, but they're a very pretty turtle. They are endangered, and sadly, Even though they are endangered, this is one of the turtles you're allowed to keep as a pet in New Jersey, as long as you have a permit. Bog turtle, on the other hand, is the only turtle that you are not allowed to keep as a pet in New Jersey under any circumstances. It's critically endangered. They're the smallest turtles in North America. They weigh less than 4 ounces. I mean, that's small. They look like babies even when they're fully adult, and they are extremely popular with collectors because they're just cute and small and easy to keep. And so poaching is a real problem. And the areas where bog turtles are still um, still have any kind of a population, you can see how very scattered the population centers are. They're actually found throughout New Jersey. They have very specific habitat needs. They like fens, which are mountain bogs and wetlands fed by mineral-rich groundwater. In other words, this was like the type of bogs that produce peat. And they hibernate in burrows where underground springs ensure that flowing water all winter. So they never freeze. They will stay at the temperature of the cold water. They can't tolerate freezing the way say bog turtles can. Box turtles can. Box turtles will dig a little deeper if it gets colder and come a little bit higher up out of the ground, but they always stay below the frost line. The thing that this habitat loss, again, people don't like bogs and fens. They like to drain them. They like to and build something on them. If you do find these bog turtles anywhere, you should not, kind of like owls, you really shouldn't publicize where they are located, because there are people, like I said, they're very valuable to collectors. And unfortunately, poachers are a serious threat to them. Okay, to wrap this up, what do you do if you find a turtle that may need help? So the best thing to do most of the time is just watch it, see if it needs help. If it has no signs of an injury and it's crossing the road, just let it cross the road. If there's traffic coming and it's parked in the middle of the road, basking, just pick it up, move it to the other side of the road, make sure it's facing the same direction it was going. If you happen to come across a large snapping turtle in the middle of the road, I keep a shovel in my car. I know it's a little weird, but I've found that that's the best thing to help a snapping turtle cross with. You just slide it under the turtle and then carry it over to the other side of the road. I once had only bird net with me, and I was found the snapping turtle, and I was trying to get it out of the way of traffic, and man stopped and said, "That's a snapping turtle." I said, "I know it's a snapping turtle." You know, I don't know whether he thought I was trying to catch the snapping turtle with one of those little butterfly nets or something, but anyway. I eventually annoyed it enough that it crossed the road and got out of danger. Another thing to do is don't assume that all turtles need water all the time. Every so often, I'll see somebody will tell me that they found this, what they describe. It's clearly a box turtle in the lawn somewhere, and they immediately took it back home to like the nearest waterway, the pond down the street, or sometimes even farther away. And box turtles don't need water all the time, or even most of the time. And there are other turtles that are semi-aquatic. Sometimes they want to be on land. They're going to lay eggs. They're going to find mates. And so the best thing to do in that situation is to assume they know where they want to go and just don't interfere with them unless they're in imminent danger. Also, don't bring turtles home to your own yard because you think it'll be safer or better to be there. And because, as I mentioned, particularly box turtles, sorry, I've got bog turtles on the mind right now, box turtles, but other turtles as well have homing systems in their brains. And if they're removed from their home territories, their chances of survival plummet. If you find a turtle with obvious injuries, or if you're not sure whether it needs to be helped, you can always call Mercer County Wildlife Center. They will offer you expert guidance. Got the telephone number here and the location. The same holds true if you happen to have a turtle illegally taken from the wild in New Jersey. You may have just picked this up not knowing that it was illegal to acquire any kind of a turtle in New Jersey from the wild, with the exception of snapping turtles, and most people don't want to take those. But you can surrender it to Mercer County. They will take care of it, and they won't turn you into the authorities. That's not their job. Their job, first and foremost, is the welfare of our wildlife, and that's what they're most concerned about. So, and people do that. They do surrender wildlife that has been illegally taken. Usually, sometimes they didn't know this was not something that they were legally not allowed to do. They maybe were trying to help, but whatever the reason, it's never good to take an animal from the wild. Unfortunately, Mercer County can help you right the wrong. So finally, we come to the end. So I've included links to information on all the turtles found in New Jersey from the New Jersey DEP. Lots of interesting information about where they're set up and what they need. Some information on the IUCN red lists and what they mean and why, how they're obtained, why they're important. If you must keep a turtle in New Jersey, you need a permit, and it's very complicated. I would suggest just not keeping pet turtles. Go out and enjoy them when you find them in the wild. But if you do feel the need to have one, this is where you go for information. Oh, by the way, you can have red-eared sliders if you like, or if you dare, you can get yourself a spiny soft shell. Just don't release them back into the wild when they prove to be annoying. Wetlands Institute will give you more information about terrapin research and conservation efforts, and some interesting information. Wildlife crossings can be found at the Margate Terrapin Rescue Site. Here's the contact if you do find lesions on turtle shells. That's Brian Zarate at the DEP, New Jersey DEP. And finally, how you can help the helpers. The Wildlife Center Friends is a nonprofit support system for Mercer County Wildlife Center. They will gladly accept donations, and those donations will help to help them improve their facilities for all the incredible wildlife that they look after there. And I think that's it. So this will be available. Everybody who is who signed up, has registered, will get all of the this presentation, including this slide. So you don't need to copy it unless you want to. But I think I will stop sharing my screen. You can find that out, or you can just email me if you need any more information. I will send that to you. Okay, and let me see screen in the show. Okay, and where did my screen? Stop share. There we go.
Oh,
I'm
right.
back. Sorry, that went kind of long. I hope everybody isn't fast asleep. I always put too much information.
But very good information it was. Thank you, Juanita, for an interesting presentation, and also for the work that you do helping these turtles get back to where they want to be.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful.
We do have a couple of comments in the Q&A. Anybody else who has any questions or comments, please type them in the chat or Q&A. See, Siwaluda, is that Colleen, I believe?
No, that's Chris.
Chris, sorry,
Yeah.
Chris. I'm horrible with names. I know you've mentioned questions before, but they said that they see a lot of turtles dug up by raccoons, or turtle eggs rather, dug up by raccoons. You did mention that was one of the major threats to turtle eggs.
Right, because they go after the disturbed earth. which, and you say if you've ever gone out to your garden and you found a plant dug up, the turtle thought, oh, disturbed earth. I mean, the raccoon saw the disturbed earth and thought that there was a possibility that something like a turtle had dug it up to lay eggs. So they're huge predators. Also, skunks will do the same thing.
Yeah, I've seen multiple dug up turtle nests on Lawrence Football Trail by Willow Pond.
Yeah.
Or Meadow Lake. Yeah, there's a nice sandy area by the trail, and unfortunately.
Seen that in the Aunt Molly Road section of St. Michael's Farm Preserve. All the eggs dug up, scattered all over the place. So they've got a lot of hazards, these poor creatures.
And Chris also mentioned about how large the snappers in their neighborhood get, often the size of garbage can lids.
They get very huge.
I've seen some extremely large ones while kayaking in places, particularly on the Molucca, where they probably have been disturbed for
growing. If you're brave, you should just go over and have a look at the scoots and see if you can count the growth rings and figure out how old they are. But probably you should just stay away from them.
Yeah, I'll take that. And then finally, Chris mentioned that they had a dead spotted turtle in their neighborhood several years ago. I don't recall offhand. Is that the kind of, depending on how they're listed by the New Jersey State Endangered and Non-Native Species Program, even the sightings of dead turtles may be of interest to them.
Yes. Yeah, that would be worth reporting.
Susan Hahn asked, what do you do with the box turtle whose territory has been completely destroyed by development?
Well, that's really a problem. That may be one of those types of turtles that you just can't release back into the wild. If it's been completely destroyed, if there's absolutely no, like say something like a warehouse, that warehouse development I mentioned had squeezed this turtle that I was returning into a very small, it was maybe about half an acre, 3/4 of an acre, bare minimum for a turtle. Had it been any smaller than that, there may have been no place to actually release the turtle, in which case it might become unreleasable. You might have to take it into care, as the saying goes.
Oh, and Fairfax just wanted to lodge a minor correction that she did not find the spotted table at Baldpate, but elsewhere in Hopewell.
Yeah, I seem to remember you found one somewhere. Oh, good. What did they say, Chris? I see you reported it and they got back to me. Oh.
Well, it may take a moment. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay.
All right.
Well, I'd like to wish everyone a happy, safe, and healthy holiday season. As I mentioned before, but maybe not everyone was on, we have no public program in December, but we will be back in January with a full slate of programs for the spring and some very interesting ones on tap in the process of getting finalized. Please take a look at our website in January, and I'm sure you'll receive emails about them as well. Find out information of all the great things that we have coming up. Oh, just for the record, Chris said they probably keep the records. They said they were not supposed to leave. Oh, he said they were supposed to leave a barrier, more of a barrier in their neighborhood, but did not.
That's sad. But now to be maybe more aware of turtles in your neighborhood and try and figure out ways that maybe you can help preserve habitat for them. That's got to be helpful.
Okay, everybody. Well, thank you all for your attendance.
Okay, thanks everyone for helping support us, and don't forget to support Mercer County Wildlife Center too.
And we'll be seeing you in the new year.
Good night.